Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Psychic Perspectives. I am Carol, my beautiful co-host, Sarah. Today, you look so lovely.
Oh, thank you.
And we are going to be talking on the topic of channeling. And channeling is something that I've had experience with, but I don't believe that you have. Have you? Or have you?
Yeah, well, that's I guess why we're talking about it, because I think channeling is there's a variety of ways to channel. And I think some people have a specific mindset on what channeling really is.
Very true.
Versus what it actually is. So
I think it varies with the person, right? It's like we think we're channeling, and then someone else says, well, that's not the definition of channeling. And so
right.
I don't want to put myself up as the expert, or we don't want to put ourselves up as the expert, because I think everybody does define it a little bit differently. So
Right.
Do you have just a quick example of when you felt like you had a moment when you were channeling someone or something?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a medium, I think that's exactly what we do when we get messages from spirit, is that we are channeling their energy. And it's really, I mean, I looked up the definition of it, and it was saying that the definition of channeling is to receive message from spirit. And
which is mediumship, right? So then it's like, why channeling? Right? Why call it channeling?
Right. Yeah. So when people say, oh, I'm not a medium, I'm a channeler, to me that's kind of incorrect. Like, mediumship is channeling, and literally, from my understanding, what I understand is that you can channel literally anything. I don't care if it's an inanimate object or a spirit guide or Akashic records or whatever. You're channeling the energy of whatever it is that you're honing in on and exuding that back, or with a message to someone else, or whatever. It's going through you.
That's a really good description. And I think you're right. Some people say, I'm not really a medium, I'm a channeler. And that again brings up, because there's so many definitions for it, right? So some people say, well, I channel. Well, what does channeling mean? And I discovered that when I was working with another gal and we were doing some channeling stuff back and forth, and she works specifically with channelers, that every single person does it differently and defines it a little bit differently. So it makes it hard to kind of nail it down. But you're right. Channeling is kind of this embodiment, right? It's this embodiment of something. But I think traditional channelers, at least in the metaphysical community, we think I sit down, I go into this space, and I give you this long drawn out message where I just go, 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 go. It's kind of like there's no stop, there's no break.
Right.
In traditional mediumship, there's kind of this back and forth where we're channeling the spirit, which is very true. We give the information, but then we pause, we check in with the sitter, we go back, we get more message, we get more information.
Right. It's not like a constant flow.
Yeah, it's interactive. Right. And I think when people refer to channeling in the classic sense, they're talking about that constant flow. I think that's a great way to put it. And they tend to think of it, I believe, channeling as in, I'm getting messages and information that are of this, higher source.
Right.
Some great examples. I mean, have you read any channeled works at all? Are you familiar with any?
Well, I guess, what is that gal's name? Abraham Hicks.
I was going to say that's a classic one. Everybody knows Abraham and Esther Hicks, so
there's another guy. But yeah, there's a few of them that I've read.
Jane Roberts was really popular, I believe, back in the 70s, and her spirit group or team or consciousness that she connected with was what she called Seth. And most of her books are still available, in used copies, but they were all about the nature of consciousness. So the Seth books are really good as well. You might be too young to remember those, but
I have heard of it though.
Jane Roberts,
there's a Facebook page that had a whole bunch of writings from that.
Right.
And I found them to be very insightful, very much so.
Well, and of course, there's the classic Course in Miracles, which a lot of people find very controversial, because A Course in Miracles was actually channeled, and forgive me, I don't have the woman's name in front of me right now, but it was actually, she channeled it from Jesus. And of course, the religious community became very upset about that because they considered it sacrilegious and they considered it demonic, even though the message itself was absolutely beautiful. So A Course in Miracles was not channeled by Marianne Williamson, but she was the one, of course, who made it more popular and mainstream. And so, I mean, most people these days have heard of A Course in Miracles. But originally that was considered a channeled piece of work as well. So I think that brings into the fact that there can be this wide scope. We even think of some saints that have channeled messages from Christ or God. And in the Catholic faith, if they've been embraced as having done it in a religious context, it's okay.
Right.
But when we do it in a non-religious and controlled environment, suddenly it's not okay.
Right. Yes. I think it's because of the stigma that comes with it.
Absolutely.
But also because some people believe that you are giving up your sovereignty by doing it, or you're giving up some sort of will of your own, depending on how far into the channeling that you're getting. As you know, people become very animated and their voice changes and their whole demeanor can change. And a lot of people look at that as like a minor possession.
Which you're absolutely right. Even parapsychology kind of looks at that and goes, it's really a possession. Transmediumship is considered that classic form of channeling where the medium steps aside, lets the spirit take over the body, so to speak, to get the message through.
Yeah. So I think if you're going to separate the difference between mediumship and channeling, maybe that is the difference.
There's a fine line, right?
Yeah. You could be more open to giving up more control over yourself, I guess, during this kind of session. But I think that channeling also works for the living. For example, like when a lot of people who do impressions, or they do, they act and they.
I love that example. Yes.
Yeah, they're like they're going to pick this person maybe that's still living, and then they really just watch everything that they do and in their little mannerisms and in the way that they talk and the way they project. And you can somehow, hone in on this person and channel that energy.
Absolutely. So absolutely. No, I love that suggestion and or that example. And it's something that I even bring up as well, because you're right. I mean, actors and, they're channeling the essence of someone and they're just embodying that. So I think that kind of gives people an example of what channeling is really just this deep embodiment of the essence of something, whether that comes out in word form or whether that comes out, like you said, in mannerisms and tone of voice, whether you're acting. Here's another example even of channeling. I think when we think of musicians and artists, right? They're channeling this creative force, and you will often hear them say, something came over me. I don't know what it was. I created something from some space that was beyond me.
When musicians talk about, you were saying about how they just get this kind of download. And I also think about it when I hear songs, for example, that sound familiar, like they should have been made the whole time. Like there was, like somehow you found the song but the song was already there, kind of thing. Does that make sense? Like,
I've never heard of that, but I mean, if you've had that experience, that's great. Yeah.
Well, like certain songs are just like meant to be written. And I think these artists that do write them,
I understand what you're saying. Right.
They just pull it down kind of from the ether, so to speak.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So I think, music is the same way.
Or dance, dance, or even athletes will say, somehow I got into this space where I was outside of my body. I mean, there are really just these really amazing spiritual experiences that people have in athletics, and dance is a primary one, where they get into an emotion or they get into something that they become this very creative process where the ego kind of steps aside and something moves in.
Yeah. It can also be kind of like an alter ego where they say, what's her name? Beyonce is always like, I'm Sasha Fierce. And
I don't know. I don't
feels like some kind of
her.
alter ego, right? But that's what helps her supposedly perform when she's on stage, is just this like embodiment of someone that's very powerful, that just, can dance and sing her butt off. So
she allows that emotion. She's channeling in that emotion, that experience. And I think that's the important thing about channeling is it's way more than just this metaphysical experience. It really is this embodiment of just whatever is out there in the universe that can be made manifest through you, whether that's a connection with spirit, perhaps, but it might not be either. It could just be, like we said, something creative, right?
Exactly.
So the interesting thing was, before we were going to do this episode, I kind of wanted to check in with spirit myself. And I wanted to say, well, what is it that I need to share? I wanted to talk about with this. And I got this really interesting response. And spirit says, it's not about channeling. It's about awareness. Psychic is nothing more than becoming aware. This is the real focus. So if we think about that as what are we aware of? Well, that's going to be based on who you are as a person, what your purpose in life is, what your passion in life is. So when people say, well, I'm interested in channeling, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but let it be a natural part of who you are. Don't try to force some type of channeled experience that maybe isn't really right for you. Does that make sense? Because it's really just about a level of awareness and a level of connection that we have.
Right. I would just say, pick something, like maybe you've never channeled before. I don't know, pick something that maybe interests you and then go from there. It's really about this embodiment though of that energy. So when you pick something to try to channel, you're bringing it in and you're really trying to feel it on all these different levels,
right?
Which is, that's all we do with psychic information anyways. But
there's a huge state of allowing and surrendering that happens in channeling that maybe doesn't happen in normal, like a mediumship or a one-on-one type of connection. I mean, we're really surrendering, stepping back, and allowing. That's the big difference. And I think you gave a great example of, Beyonce or an actor or a dancer. They step aside and allow the experience to take them to where they need to go.
Right.
And another good example that just came to mind that I forgot to mention is people who do energy work. They are channeling energy. So we tend to think of channeling as informational only. That's not true.
Right. You can channel elements.
Absolutely. Anything. You can become one with that.
Right. So that's actually, okay.
Go ahead. No, go
right there. Become one with. Yes. So for example, when we were talking about inanimate objects earlier, why would you want to channel an inanimate object? I don't really know, but it's kind of that idea that you're becoming one with it. What would it like to be that inanimate object, or what would it be like?
I think that's a perfect example. And you're right, because I didn't understand that for a long time, especially in the metaphysical community where people were really interested in stones and that kind of stuff. And then one day I kind of got this insightful lesson where I realized, let's say, for example, connecting with an animal, right?
Right.
Let's just use the animal elephant, right? So when you really want to embody the energy of elephant, it's not that you're trying to become the elephant, but what are the characteristics of elephant and how does that assist you? We think of elephants as smart and loving and gentle, but strong. So if you think about channeling that energy, you're bringing it into yourself. So you're bringing in those qualities. You're not becoming the elephant, but you're embodying the essence of what elephants generally represent.
Exactly.
Same with stones, right? When people go, oh, I really resonate with a stone. It's not that the stone has some magical property. I think that the stone has characteristics. And when we tap into those characteristics, when we allow those characteristics to blend with us, that's when they have a benefit. That's how they affect us. It's not, see, and I just want to take the magical property out of it. Yes, it blends with you when you blend with it, and then it has a result.
I don't understand why it has to be magical.
I think sometimes, well, and I know I looked at it that way for a long time.
To me, it's very like
it
logical.
it is, and I get it now, but I didn't before, and that's why I think sometimes people go, well, I just, that doesn't make any sense to me. But you go into nature, you blend with nature. Do you not embody nature? And that has very, very profound effects on people at the physical level.
Absolutely.
Because we're channeling nature. We're allowing, we're surrendering, we are connecting without interruption. And I think that's a big detriment to people who want to do channeling or even mediumship. We get in our head, right? Where's it coming from? How does it work? Well, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm creating it? Well, I want this information. I don't want that information. So until you get to a point where you can step aside from all of those egoic questions and concerns and controls, I think that limits your ability to drop down into a channeled state, regardless of what you want to connect with.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. And mostly because it is such an allowing state. You can't have any expectations whatsoever on what kind of information you're going to receive or like none of that. It just let it all go and allow that information to come in.
You brought up a good point I want to touch base on, though, because I hadn't thought of that before, which is why I love having these discussions with you, which was the fear of surrender, right? Yeah. And I think that's one thing that I just felt like I needed to touch on or bring us back to a little bit more. There's nothing to fear from it because you're always in control. It's kind of like moving into a state of hypnosis where people are like, oh, I don't want to be hypnotized because I'm afraid I'm going to lose control. That's fine. You don't have to go any deeper than you want to go. Right. So, but you're still not going to lose yourself. And I think when people do drop into trance mediumship, they've been training and they've been preparing for that for a period of time.
Right.
It's not like they're just doing it all of a sudden and then getting possessed, right? It's like they didn't go from here to here. They've been growing and learning and expanding, and their ability to control that situation is something that they've developed over time. So I don't want people to be afraid of it. Because you're always in control. You always have choice.
You do. I think there's still a fine line because there are negative things out there. And
right. We've talked about that.
It's like you have to be careful. That's just the nature of it. But I think you would hopefully be able to recognize when something's wrong. What's funny that you mentioned hypnotism, and I've never been hypnotized. I've always kind of had that weird feeling like, you're not going to hypnotize me. No.
It's difficult for me too. I think it's because we both have control issues.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So I don't know. That it is kind of like that though, where you're just sort of surrendering to the energy. I think it is important, like you're saying, to recognize that you have a sense of control over the situation.
Absolutely. You're not losing control. You're not losing control.
Just be smart. Don't, try to channel things that are dark and negative and then wonder why, you have problems later. That's all. That's all I have to say.
No, and I think that's true. And we have talked about negativity in the world. And sometimes people get concerned even with just their own psychic perceptions, right? Because things come in and maybe they're negative. Maybe they're picking up on tragedies, or maybe they're picking up on collective consciousness. Because let's face it, we've been going through the pandemic and through a great deal of turmoil in the world right now. So there's a lot of energy that's out there that can feel very negative. Yeah. So ultimately, how do we control those things? Well, we want to stay focused on what's positive. We want to keep our own energy out of a state of fear. We've talked about all of these things in some of our other episodes. The other thing too, I think with channeling higher sources is you're going to know that they're positive. They have a good feeling. You feel calm, you feel loving, you feel embraced, you feel supported, you feel guided. The information is beneficial for you. It's not going to lead you astray. It's not going to trick you. It generally will be, even something that will be true for other people as well, like some universal information. Again, we think about, Abraham and Esther Hicks, all of that stuff is beneficial for all people, not just one person. So
and it really resonates,
it does.
I think for a lot of people,
qualities that will make you realize it's legitimate. And people go, well, you can be deceived and you can be deceived. And okay, sure, you can be deceived on some information, but at some point, the liar comes out. The foolery comes out. It has a feeling that just doesn't vibe right, or something that doesn't go there. Right. So when you're connected with that pure creativity or energy or information or whatever it is, it's going to have a vibe. And you should be pretty able to recognize that. So
I think that's why it is important, maybe before you're going to attempt any kind of channeling of anything, it is important to work on your vibration and, just try to get yourself in a higher place. Make sure you're not in a bad mood, or you're not, carrying a lot of baggage or something like that. Which is the responsible thing to do, I suppose, is, just to make sure that you are in the right headspace, and that you're treating what you're doing with some sort of reverence and respect, because it is an ancient type of thing that, working with spirit is sacred, right?
Sure. And, here's an interesting thing that just kind of popped into my head. So I think it was kind of fed to me a little bit, is when we think about actors who are channeling negative characters, right? Who are picking up the essence of, let's say, maybe they need to be a murderer, or maybe they need to be a traumatized victim. You often realize and hear in interviews with them that they really struggled with having to connect with that type of energy, because they're embodying that, they're becoming that experience, and they wear that. So that's not a spirit attacking them per se, right? That's not happening to them,
but it can still be draining, and it can
but they're moving into the essence of that. And I think that really speaks to what you were just talking about being careful about having ourselves in the right energetic space. So I think that was a really good example to just let people realize that, when you're in a negative space, you're struggling, try to shift your energy a little bit. And it can be really tough. And let's say you're going through a traumatizing period, or you really are depressed, then open yourself up to channeling love. Open yourself up to channeling healing. Open yourself up to solutions, not problems. Be sure that you're looking for a positive to the negative space that you're in. Solutions, right? If you are feeling down, only focus on channeling the opposite of where you are.
Right.
So that can be another aspect to consider.
Right. I understand that.
Another thing that I thought we could just address very briefly is sometimes people have spontaneous channeling experiences, and then over time, they learn how to control them. And I think, like any ability that we have to connect intuitively or psychically or even mediumship, it can start very spontaneously. And those can sometimes be frightening. I remember when I was first going through my experiences that they happened to me, and I was like, what the heck was that? Right. Where I would get lessons from spirit. I would, it's like I would wake up in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden it just sounded like someone was talking to me. And I'm literally just information after information. I started sleeping with pen and pencil, and I still do, because I have to wake up in the middle of the night and go, okay, all right, I'm getting this. They're giving me this. Because that's when my ego is less detached. That's when I'm in a more relaxed state. Now, as time has gone by, I can sit down and do it in a conscious state. I like to do it through writing personally. But I think if you're noticing that you're having spontaneous experiences with channeling, that maybe kind of explore that a little bit further, but then don't be afraid if you can't control it. It may just be one of those things where it comes in and it's going to stay spontaneous for you. So I just wanted to mention a little bit about that spontaneous versus controlled, because it can be developed, but it may not be your forte, and that's okay. So again, I want to go back to the original question because I don't remember if you answered it or not, but have you ever actually had what you would consider to be a channeled experience? Because not everyone does, and I think that's okay.
I think for me, I do, because I do have such a control issue. Mm-hmm. I try not to get too far into it, I guess.
Well, what about even in an artistic type of, like acting or anything like that? I mean, have you ever had it happen artistically or?
I was gonna say, okay, so I do know how to channel the living, meaning like, I guess I can do, like impressions or not good ones, but I'm just saying like, okay, I could channel what I call my inner whatever, like, whoever it is that day, right? It could be, and every now and then I do have weird things where it's like an accident and this like British crap comes out of my mouth, or like weird accents that I don't even know where that's from. That's kind of accidental, but I guess when I write is very much channeling. There's a lot of times where I'm very solution oriented, so I will try to write things out. As far as mediumship goes, I noticed that certain people that I've connected with very well, I will actually feel them in my face, which is a weird sensation of like almost being able to look out through their eyes, but then also like feeling their facial expressions. I don't know, it's kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And some of their mannerisms, stuff like that. But that's about it. I mean, I wouldn't say that I've gone full on into some sort of channeling session where I've, maybe not had control, or I don't even remember what I've said or something like that. My voice doesn't change too much. And I say too much because sometimes when you are channeling, you do pick up their little words, or you will pick up certain mannerisms and stuff. So it just depends, but I don't try to go that far with it. For me, it's kind of just like, I'm just getting the information and getting it back, which is the same thing, but it's not on a certain level of it. Right. Which
very true. Very true. Yeah. I think it is definitely a degree. And I know that I've shared some of my channeled stuff with you, and, some of the lessons that I shared with you, they were very lengthy and they were very complicated and they were very detailed. And I remember before that particular lesson with you, I was told a week ahead of time to have pen and paper ready. So I went, okay, all right, that's an odd thing to hear. And then about a week later, it just started. And I would write somewhere 2, 3, 4 pages a day, just of information that it just flowed right one after the other. Now, some people do that verbally because they're in an informational reception. They're receiving information. Some people do that verbally. If we look at Suzanne Giesemann, who is a very world famous medium, she channels a group of collective beings that are called Sanaya. And if you subscribe to her on Facebook, she does little sayings every day as far as, things that Sanaya share with her. Same thing for me. I'm doing my daily lessons from spirit, right? Those don't come from me. The daily lessons from spirit come from spirit. Now, whether or not they're coming from a single being, I don't think that that's really important. What's important is that's been given to me. I hear it. I get a feeling for exactly what needs to be shared. And I put that right back out. It's not generated by my creative mind. Often they're topics or things that I wouldn't even be thinking about. So that's the difference. It's something that needs to be manifested in the world. So those are other examples of, kind of connecting and giving that channeled information back out. Mm-hmm. So I just want to touch really briefly on a definition. And because you had talked about, you looked it up and you found kind of this definition. And I do think that it depends on the person that you're talking to, but I tried to get as thorough as I could in my definition because of my experiences. It doesn't mean that my definition is the only one that's right. It's just how I'm going to define it, because I do channeling. And so we look at channeling. It's a highly embodied state with a particular source that results in bringing forward energy, information, or both through the ego, right? So we become a channel, a funnel, a conduit, or even a medium. Now, these can occur in any context, religious or non-religious, spiritual or personal, for any aspect of life where greater awareness needs to be brought forward.
Right.
So a channeler is a conduit for greater awareness and the potential for all humanity brought to one's attention by a higher source. What is channeled merely takes a shape based on the best use of the channel being utilized. So that's pretty complicated, but at the same time, if you go back and you listen to that a couple of times, I think there's some key things. Highly embodied with a particular source. Because remember, we're not always channeling someone. We can be channeling something, energy, emotion, nature, another person. So sources of information that we channel vary. They don't all come from spirit. They may come from this cosmic, beyond our physical limitations.
Right.
Scientists even say, I woke up one morning and I had the aha for what it was that I needed to do. Right. But I don't know where it came from. So
yeah, we've talked to Tesla. Remember? He said all kinds of stuff.
I do. I have a blog post where I thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, no, but that, I mean, I've heard it on countless shows that talk about how he received downloads, and he would just
That's another word for it. I'm glad you brought that up. Downloads. Yes.
He would just know. He would see the thing that he was going to make and he would make it.
Right. And then I was asked,
said he got that from an outer source, and he was ridiculed. So
absolutely. But, even Einstein touches on that. Even Einstein realized at some point that the linear egoic mind is limited, that the greater awareness exists out there in the cosmos. If you're not religious or spiritual, let's just look at it as science. Everything already exists. So connect with source, right? Don't limit it, because the other thing is channeling takes a shape based on the best use of the channel. If I'm a dancer, I'm probably going to channel movement and emotion, because that's my form and function. If I'm an actor, I'm going to channel that, right? If I'm an artist, I will paint or create music. So what we channel is based on who we are.
That's very true. And I would say,
it might not be a medium. It might not be a psychic.
Well, and what your intention was to start with. So
very true. Yes. Because intention can matter.
Yeah. Because I mean, when you make the intention to channel like the Akashic stuff, usually we're going in there to really get some good spiritual kind of insight that is beneficial to our lives, that give us some sort of perceptive change in areas that we need the most. And so
very true.
When you're coming at it from that angle, I think that's why you do kind of have to be in like a higher vibe state, so that you can receive, the information that's for your highest good. Totally agree. Yeah, the intention does matter. And the more loving you become, and as a matter of fact, one of the daily lessons that I got just yesterday that I haven't posted yet was, when we move into a state of service, the universe then starts to use us. Right. It doesn't mean that we're not fulfilling our passion. I'm fulfilling my passion right now, talking about all of these different topics and helping other people. But I'm doing it from a place of not only my own passion, but of truly wanting to help other people. I become a conduit at that point. The universe says, look, here's a channel, right? Or here's a great scientist with the right mindset. This person truly wants to make a difference. Here's the form and function for bringing that scientific information through this person, or this song through this artist, or this ability to become an athlete, this energy, this movement of body. So don't put
a limitation on your, I mean, yes, you're right. I think an intention matters, but I think it also has to flow naturally from who we are. I love teaching. I love learning. I love this topic. I've become a conduit for information.
Right. I think there probably are
On
some
these
limitations. Like you're saying, it's about the person that's channeling. There probably are some limitations to who and what you can channel depending on your own vibrational level and capabilities.
And
I'm
your
assuming.
purpose. I call it form and
Right.
function. Well, I don't call it, spirit calls it form and function. It's form and function. What's your form and what's your function?
Right.
Right. It's like, how are you designed and what's your purpose?
Yeah.
Because we have that and those have to align. So anyway, I just thought it's a little bit more of a complicated definition, but I wanted to try to get in there and just not make it this metaphysical, this is not just a woo-woo aspect. This is really about connecting your consciousness with the greater cosmic awareness, however you define that, and bringing that forward for the benefit of yourself and for others. And when you move into that state of surrendering, allowing, high vibration and service, that greater, higher mind will use you as a conduit to create and manifest in the world. What more can I say about channeling than that? Well, I remember you mentioning that someone had reached out to you about channeling. And of course, I've had people ask me, what is it like for me? How do I do it? What recommendations do they have? And I think this whole show has really been a lot about kind of embracing what we've talked about as getting you started for that. Being open and being willing, setting the intention. You may not be called to do this kind of work. You might not be channeling information like Seth or Esther Hicks does with Abraham.
Yeah.
But just figure out what it is that you are good at channeling, even if it's music or science or health, and be okay with that.
Right.
I did have a few books that I wanted to share with people that I think are interesting. The first one is Opening to Channel, and I will have references to this down in the show notes. This one's a little bit more metaphysical in nature. There's nothing wrong with it. So if you're interested in the classical channeling as far as metaphysics is concerned, where you're wanting to connect with spirit, to get information, to bring forward, again, nothing wrong with that. I do that. I love it. I think it's beautiful. Opening to Channel is a good book. Another wonderful one that's a little newer by Sarah Wiseman is called Writing the Divine. I personally like it because, of course, it's about writing. And I think that writing is a great way to do channeling because it
really is.
It pulls you out of your personality, right? You're not being distracted. So you're writing and then you just allow this creativity to flow, right?
Right. It's for me, it's like as soon as I pick up the pen and I go to hit the paper, it's like an automatic
likewise
zone open.
Absolutely. And there's a big difference between channeling something and just letting information flow in versus me thinking about, well, I want to make my notes and I want to say this and I want to say that. That's coming from me, right? That's my thoughts. But when we, open to channel, we're allowing, again, whatever information needs to come through us. So the Writing the Divine is really nice because she's got 13 different little practical exercises in there that you can do. And I think that that's a great one. The other one that I highly recommend, and this is brand new, and this is called The Science of Channeling by Helene Wabene. And she's actually the director of research for the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And she also just this past year became the president for the Parapsychological Association. She's actually a scientist, but she has considered herself an intuitive and a channeler her whole life. And so, of course, she had this huge struggle with how do we bring the awareness that our consciousness is capable of knowing things outside of ourselves, beyond space and time. And how do we bring that over to science? And I love that she has really done this. This book answers a lot of really good questions, like how can you trust the information? What does channeling feel like? She actually interviewed and did studies with tons of channelers. And then she brought all this data together and then presented that so that you have not just one person's opinion, but a scientist's analysis of a lot of different channelers and the commonalities. And much of what we've spoken about today, she talks about. It's a fabulous book. So I highly recommend everybody, please read this if you're interested in channeling, because it's really
interesting because
very
you know
objective.
How, like you said, you more often now are getting health things for people, and you're picking up more on their physical aspects. That to me also suggests, you know, when you're channeling this information, because that's what you're doing, this is how your body is picking up on it, or is how it's registering it, so to speak. So. So when she says everybody is different, I think that's totally true. Because for me, it's a lot of it is like on a personality / emotional level or something. Or at least during mediumship, it's like I'm picking up a lot of these like personality things.
But we're always expanding and growing. I mean, I didn't get any physical stuff for the most part, probably 5 or 6 years ago. So I think that's the point, is we're always expanding and we're always growing and we're always shifting and evolving.
And like, I said to my friend about, because we were talking about it before, about the volume level, whereas like mediumship is having a relay with someone on the other side, and maybe you're on mid to low volume, but when you're full on channeling, it's more of like the high, you're on high, and you're really just embodying that energy and whatever it is,
whatever the source is. Right. Exactly. That's very true. Yeah. And for anybody that's interested, what Sarah's talking about, the volume knob, I actually have a video on my personal channel where I've been getting some lessons from Spirit, and they're giving me all these stereo related references. And one of them is the volume knob. One of them is the bass and treble knob. They recently came out with something called amplitude, and it talks about impedance and resistance. It's really amazing. And I'm going, I wouldn't think of these things myself, nor did I understand what amplitude was in reference to stereo. So here I am channeling this information. I'm writing it down. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And then afterwards I have to go back and I have to Google half these words because I'm like, and I went, oh, I get it. They're right. But the volume knob that you're speaking of, and I think that's our degree of connection, right? It's not just our psychic awareness. How connected are we? Because if we took that in terms of, let's say, again, the actor or the musician, right? The actor who truly embodies, the actor who turns that knob all the way on and connects. And
to me, there's a difference between, you know, changing your voice for a role and really like embodying that person's very, very minute.
The best actors will tell you, I become that person. They step aside and become that person. And so the same is true if you're doing mediumship. You can become the loved one. You can, but you can become anything, you know. I mean, that's the point of bringing that information forward. So anyway, I just wanted to give people some resources, because I'm not going to set myself up for being the expert on channeling. I know how it works for me, and I can explain it and I could talk about it. I love that I get lessons and messages from Spirit that I'm supposed to share. I'm moving less into using the term channeling, and they've been encouraging me to get away from that, because really, and this is something I will share, thank you for letting me share it, is there really been honing in on me. It's not about psychic. I have to get out of that mindset. It's about awareness.
Okay.
It's not psychic anymore. It's the level of awareness that we have. How connected are we with the greater cosmic mind, right? However you define that, whether you call it God, science, whether we're channeling health, whether we're connecting with, again, dance, energy, whatever it is.
It's funny. All
this is out there.
I'm getting this bandwidth type of analogy, where it's like when you have a bandwidth that's like this versus, you know, the more information that's
You're
coming
right
through.
On point. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And so as you expand your bandwidth and as you expand your connection, it's really not about being psychic anymore. And that's where they're getting me. That's where they're moving me. It's about awareness. And you can be in that state all day long. And when we get to that place where we step out of the, well, I want to get a psychic hit, And then I'm going to come back over here and live my life. And then I'm going to get a psychic hit. And then I'm going to come back over. We're popping back and forth. When we live in a state of constant awareness, a constant connection with the higher vibration, the constant connection with higher mind, we have all information accessible to us at all times. Now, we don't need to know it all at all times, but when we do need to know something, if we're in that state of allowing throughout our day, what we need to know comes forward just like that.
Yeah.
Just like that. That's not psychic anymore. That's just a state of awareness. That's just a state of connection.
Right.
And so I guess that volume knob that you were talking about is like, let's just focus on getting more connected, being more aware. And you can't
let's just
do
focus
that
on turning it on. How about that?
or even turning it on. And I think that happens a lot for people that realize that when they are having some connections, we start to label them as psychic, or maybe we'll say, if we're religious, we might say, oh, God has been speaking to me. Nothing wrong with that. Keep growing, keep expanding with that. But make sure it's just about you opening up and receiving whatever it is that you need to know rather than trying to control it.
Right. I just want to say the highest vibration out there is love. So if you can tap into that first as like this is where I need to be, just kind of like stay there. It's like state of the light, it's like state of the light.
But it's hard. And it's easy to say that. Again, I used to deal with depression a lot. I mean, really bad depression before I changed my diet. And diet was everything. And I ended up getting rid of that just through dietary changes. But I mean, I was depressed sometimes to the point that I was suicidal, and I really sought a lot of help, and I just wasn't getting any resolution. It can be really hard to say, feel love and feel this and feel that when you're in that state of mind. So I don't want to make it easy and say, oh, it's just about love. It's just about this. Because when you're in a hard space, it can be really tough to get there.
Well, unfortunately, I use love instead of God because for the same reason. And because of the negative connotations that religion has now. But to me, it's about,
that's a good point.
You want to stay in that high vibe, whatever that means to you. It has to be the light. It has to be love. I understand kind of what you're saying, about being depressed and stuff. And for me, it was,
or fear. Fear's another one. Fear's another one. As a matter of fact, I think my daily lesson for today was about living in a constant state of fear. How do you get out of that when you're stuck in it?
Right. To me, it was really just reaching for that light. I mean, yeah, maybe I have an advantage because I have some sort of deep-seated faith in God, but that is the way. That is the way out. It doesn't have to be the man on the throne. It's just believe in something bigger than your damn self.
I think that's really the key point. That's just what I was getting ready to say. It's about believing that something is greater than yourself. I mean, even if it's just science, right? It's like this big old universe and nature. It has this natural intelligence to it. There is more out there than what exists in our own being.
Right. And when you were talking about how do you not be deceived, it's like, you have to have discernment on some level. And the only way you're going to know is by understanding what is this unconditional, loving, high vibrational feeling that I'm feeling. That's weird. And then when I feel this other one that's a little bit lower, it's like, that's how you're going to know. If you don't have the experience with the really high and loving, unconditional, loving vibration, you might not recognize it, is what I'm saying. So aim high, try to focus for the higher vibrational things to channel, if that's what you're going to do. And your intention, again, is everything. So why is it that you want this information? What is it that you're trying to achieve?
Right.
Try to make it for your highest,
your
highest good, or for your sitter's highest good, whatever it is. But
that was what I was just getting ready to say. You're
okay.
Right. It's like, if you're depressed, then the question that you need to be asking is, or if you're fearful, right? Because let's face it, a lot of people are afraid right now. So,
Yeah.
and I finally did that. I lived in fear, especially when, the election was going on and there was this big transition period. And I finally said, I'm so sick and tired of being afraid. I'm like, what is it that I need to do to get past this? So focus on the solution. If you're in a state where you can't maybe high vibe, turn to a higher source and start asking for solutions, answers. What do I need to do? Where do, that's the intention, how to get out of that space and be in a more loving state and let that information come to you. Right.
Right.
Because we all do get in negative states, even anger.
I tend to try to break down my fears, like break it down. Like, why are you scared? Oh, well, I'm scared because I don't want to die. Well, we all die. So it's
but that to me is your logical mind answering it. I mean, not to say that you can't be inspired to get those answers when you start asking them.
I know, but
think
I'm
those are
saying,
important.
Like, you got to break it down. Most fear is really plainly related to death and pain. So
sure.
So what I'm saying is
loss of some kind.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, but
pain, you're right.
Talking about deep-seated fears are usually related to death. So if you have all of these fears, what's the common denominator? It's because I don't want to die. Then you still have either a lack of faith in the afterlife or a lack of faith in yourself somehow. In my opinion, this is my opinion.
Right.
When you release this idea that we're not going to be around forever, or you release this attachment to the ego, oh, well, I'm not going to be around. We know, we know we're not going to be around forever. And there has to be some sort of deep-seated realization in that in order to get over specific fears, like what we're dealing with right now. And then the other part of that is pain. Some people don't care about pain. They don't care about death. They care about pain. Like, I don't care if I die, but damn, I'm really scared of pain. It could be
suffering at some level, right? Suffering at some level. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm just saying, to try to break it down, what is the root cause of my fear? What is the root cause of whatever solution that I need? So that way that you're not
being more specific on what answers you want, I think, is what you're kind of getting to. And you're right. That is a good advice. If you've got very specific, you can actually get more specific answers. And I think that that's true. And I have done that in the past. So you're right. I've kind of forgotten. I've done a lot of shadow work, not that I'm perfect, but I mean, I have done a lot of childhood stuff I've gotten past but I had to move through all of that. So I asked much more specific questions.
Right. For example, ultimately, that is how you raise your vibration. That's it. Like, that is the shadow work. That is how you're releasing this baggage, because now you're acknowledging my fear. I'm acknowledging that I'm scared of death. I'm acknowledging that I'm scared of pain or whatever it is. And I can understand why. I can understand why I'm scared. I can understand it. But I also understand that that's not necessarily true. And that I'm, feeding into this for really no reason. So,
and what's the solution or the option that I need that shifts that so that I'm not in that state anymore?
Right.
And that's the personal work that we need to do. When you go to my website, and this sounds like a plug and I don't mean it that way, but it kind of naturally flows into the fact that I realize one of the things that I do is I try to help people optimize their well-being. And optimize means making yourself run more efficiently and be more happy and get out of these states, right? And so when I do sessions with people, they go, oh, you're a medium, so you're going to talk to my loved one. And I'm like, yeah, probably not. I mean, it does happen. Don't get me wrong, but that's not my function. My function is to figure out what it is that's not working in your life right now and reflect that back to you, then connect with your spiritual team to give solutions and suggestions. And of course, your spiritual team is generally one that tells me, here's what you need to work on.
Right. And 9 times out of 10, it is straight up a perception. that you need to change about something.
Absolutely. It is all about what we need to do to change. That comes up. It's not about what someone else needs to do. It's not about the world changing. It's about the person, the individual changing, which is why I say my sessions are about helping you optimize your well-being. And spirit is the one that guides me to what it is that you need to do that. And again, 9 times out of 10, it's mental and emotional long before it's physical, long before it's spiritual, long before it's energetic. It's all about the mental and emotional. So that's why I'm saying, people are, they're dealing with trauma or they're suffering at some mental and emotional level that is limiting their ability to be joyful, to live an optimal life. Right.
And sometimes I want to say it is important to reach out for help. It is important to, I guess, just admit that you need help. I am the worst at it. I hate asking for help. I don't particularly like it. And yet I understand the value of it. Right. And when you really take the time to just say, okay, I need help, go ahead, go get the therapy that you need. Go, figure out what it is that you need. Get that psychic session, whatever it is, but don't ignore it. That's like the worst thing you could do.
It is the worst thing to ignore. Right.
Is just be like, I'm fine. Nothing's wrong.
But I think that becomes the benefit then, and we're off the topic of channeling a little bit. And so I may end up making
this like how we got on the subject.
I know it's just kind of flowing. So I may end up making this like kind of like a little second add-on video, but you're right. I mean, we should get help when it's outside our scope. And sometimes we all get frustrated to the point that we need hope. Ultimately, we're going to have to be the solution. Other people are not going to solve it for us. That's the first thing we need to know when we get help. But I tend to also move to the space that ultimately another human being is another ego. When you come to me, I'm another ego. I'm going to be limited in how far I can help you. Certainly, I'm going to connect with your spiritual team because they've got the answers, right? The greater cosmic awareness is where you need to go. So most of my personal growth has come from very loving, supportive relationships, like my friendship with you and other people. And I'm not to say that other teachers and experiences haven't helped me, but my primary support has come from God, consciousness, cosmic awareness. That's where my awareness shifts.
Right. And going
that's
within.
The whole point.
Right. Going within for the answers. That's where you find it.
So again, I go back to my website. Oh my gosh, maybe this is a plug for me. It says optimize your well-being and embrace expanded awareness. It's not about being psychic. It's about connecting with that higher, whatever you call it, God, love, science, nature, Gaia, Buddha, I don't care. It's the same thing with a different name. That has all the answers you need. That's where you go.
Yeah.
That's the heart of every religion. Turn to God first. Turn to God first. That's where your answers come from. So we kind of got off on it, but I want people to realize you got to go there. That's where the answers come from. Yes, other people can help you. Go,
chances are that's probably why you're trying to channel to begin with.
That's probably very true. You want insights, you want answers. There is nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Channel, why did my parents treat me like this? Why do I still suffer that trauma? Why did this bad experience happen to me? What's going on in politics today? And I'm so afraid of it. Right? How does that help me? Keep it towards your expansion, and you will find that greater awareness will support your growth.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does.
So yes, we got a little bit off of the channeling topic,
just a little bit,
but I think the point of it is to recognize that it's not just the channeling itself that's important. It's about really understanding that it's a state of awareness. It's about enhancing your well-being and the well-being of others from this highest possible perspective.
Right.
So I think we've covered channeling. So if anybody has any questions, as always, they can get a hold of us. I do some channeling, but again, I don't want people to kind of get stuck on that. I just kind of want them to expand and grow. And any last minute comments from you before we head out?
No, I always think of stuff later.
All right,
I
then.
should have said that. No.
Well, thank you everybody for sticking with us, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.